My husband said to his mistress, "I'm afraid this laughable marriage with my wife won't last another year. My wife could never match my level." His mistress laughed, proud of him. I smiled and said, "Why wait another year? Let's end it today." Then I walked away, leaving behind my husband's regretful gaze. My name is Amanda Sanchez, 37 years old, chief architect and founder of Sanchez Design Studio, one of the fastest-growing coastal interior design firms in Monterey Bay. After 3 days attending an architecture seminar in San Diego, I drove back to my beachside villa, carrying with me a $6 million contract I had just signed with Horizon Hospitality Group. I wanted to share the good news with my husband, Dominic Hayes, a former marketing executive who now works as my company's representative, handling communications and contracts. As I stepped through the door, the first sound I heard was laughter echoing from the kitchen. Dominic was sitting with his close friends, Travis, Noel, Eric, and Jessica Moore, his college best friend, who had also been the maid of honor at our wedding. Through the glass door, I saw them raising their wine glasses and laughing loudly. Dominic spoke with smug pride. "My marriage is a joke. Amanda's not in my league. All she does is draw and thinks she's some kind of genius." Jessica leaned her head back in laughter, her fingers brushing over Dominic's hand. "You're the real face of the company." "Without you, she's nothing." Dominic raised his glass, his eyes gleaming with arrogance. "She's good at landing contracts, but I'm the one who gives the brand its value." Laughter erupted, mingling with the clinking of glasses, while I stood in the hallway, feeling the blood in my veins freeze. They were sitting in the house I designed, on the sofa I picked, drinking the wine I bought, mocking me, the person who built everything they were enjoying. Before I could catch my breath, I heard Dominic continue. "All I need is for Amanda to re-sign the legal representation authorization. Then I'll prove she's unstable and unfit to lead." Jessica let out a soft laugh, sweet enough to chill the bones. "The media will follow my lead. Once the rumors spread, she'll implode on her own." Trembling, I pulled out my phone and began recording the entire conversation. As I turned to leave, I caught sight of Jessica opening the wine cabinet, so familiar with it, it was shameless. That night, I sat alone in my office, staring out at the ocean, the moonlight reflecting on the model of Coastal Haven, the project I had poured 2 years of my life into. My phone buzzed with an anonymous text. "Check your company email." Dominic changed access rights. My heart pounded as I opened my laptop and saw the legal representation rights had been updated, Dominic's name added, and Jessica listed as PR director. Everything unfolded in absolute silence, save for the sound of waves crashing offshore, like the rhythm of my shattering heart. I understood then. My marriage wasn't just a joke to him. It had become a carefully calculated plan to steal the legacy I built with my own hands. But if they thought I would stay silent, they forgot one thing. I laid the foundation for all of this, and I can tear it down and rebuild it, alone. The next morning, as sunlight filtered through the white curtains, I sat silently at my desk, gazing at the hundreds of blueprints I had created. Every line, every number was born of my sweat and sleepless nights, and I began to wonder, when did Dominic start plotting to take it all? My memories led me back to 2 months ago, when Dominic walked into my studio, holding a cup of hot coffee, his smile gentle as if doing me a favor. "Amanda, I think you should authorize me to sign contracts while you're traveling. It'll be easier, less paperwork back and forth," he said calmly. Back then, I had no reason to doubt him. I smiled and signed the authorization he handed me, feeling grateful to share the load. Now, looking back at a copy of that document, the glaring red seal in the corner feels like an unhealed wound. I realized it wasn't just administrative paperwork, it was the first step in a coup. Dominic never wanted to support me, he wanted to take my place. I opened my laptop, accessed the company's management system, and there it was, plain to see. Legal representation was no longer mine alone. Dominic had inserted his name into every transaction, and Jessica was listed as strategic communications lead. A chill gripped my palms. They weren't just stealing my title, they were erasing me from the company I founded. I picked up the phone and called Maya Collins, my private attorney and trusted friend, who had helped me protect my designs during my first year in business. Maya's voice was steady and firm as I told her what happened. Amanda, if they changed legal representation without your signed consent, they're trying to legitimize control. You need to act immediately. I was silent for a moment, staring out the window. Seagulls circled the shore, waves lapping steadily, reminding me that life moves on, even when someone is trying to pull me under. What do you think I should do? I asked, my voice hoarse from sleeplessness. Maya replied without hesitation. Gather every piece of evidence: emails, contracts, invoices, transaction logs. And most importantly, don't confront them. Let them think you don't know yet. I nodded, slowly regaining my composure. In my mind, the scattered pieces began to fall into place. The meetings where Dominic always took the spotlight, the times he forgot to send me contract copies, Jessica's sudden presence in every major project. They didn't act on impulse. This had been in motion for a long time. I turned off speakerphone, opened my company email, and began combing through every folder. Something stirred inside me, not rage, but a cold clarity, like when an architect realizes the foundation is collapsing and must redraw the entire design. I looked once more at the coastal haven model, gently touched the miniature oak roof, and whispered, if they want war, they'll see me fight with the very thing they underestimated. Precision, and I began. I reopened the company's internal email system, each folder appearing like a map with tangled threads, client names, contract dates, attached files. I filtered by sender, Dominic Hayes. Within seconds, hundreds of emails appeared, mostly exchanges with media partners. But then a particular thread caught my eye, titled Rebranding Proposal, Hayes Creative Group. I froze. That name had never existed in our company records. My hands went cold as I opened the email. In a message to an investor in Los Angeles, Dominic wrote, we, the team at Hayes Creative Group, have finalized the interior design concept under a new vision. Minimalist, modern, emotionally resonant attached were the renderings I had created for the Coastal Haven project. The lines, the color palettes, the layout, all distinctly mine. Except one thing. The signature block at the bottom no longer read Amanda Sanchez, lead architect. It now said Hayes Design Division. I stared at the screen, my heart pounding so loudly I could hear it in my ears. He had sent my work to an investor under the banner of his new company. That sense of being robbed felt like watching someone take the home you built and putting their own name on the front gate. I scrolled down and saw a reply from Jessica Moore. Professional tone, confident, sweet as honey. Thank you, Dominic. I'll ensure our media team publishes the article about this new project on schedule. This will be our brand's turning point, our. That word lodged in my throat. They weren't talking about me or Sanchez Design Studio anymore. They were talking about them, as if they were the co-founders of a new empire built from my blood and bones. Jessica's wording was pure PR, polished and unmistakable. With Dominic's creative talent and our new strategic direction, Hayes Creative Group will lead next year's coastal design trends. I stopped there, biting my lip until I tasted blood. Dominic's creative talent? He couldn't even sketch a properly scaled draft. And Jessica? She was painting lipstick on a thief. I began downloading every email, saving every attachment, every render I remembered drawing through sleepless nights. I renamed the folder proof_01, then repeated the process with every thread connected to Hayes Creative Group. With each file saved, the tremor in my body eased, as if I were laying the first bricks of a new wall to protect myself. By the time I was done, it was nearly 2 a.m. I leaned back in my chair, breathing slowly, watching the laptop glow in the darkness of my studio. The light fell upon rolled-up drawings in plastic tubes beside the desk. things they dismissed, things I treasured as parts of my soul. I whispered to myself, voice ragged, I don't need to scream. The truth will do it for me. Then I turned off the light, closed my laptop, and knew the battle had officially begun. The next morning, I arrived at the office earlier than usual. The atmosphere inside Sanchez Design Studio felt strangely silent. Only the dim light from the large window falling across the drafting table, casting shadows over half-finished miniature models. As I walked through the lobby, I could feel the averted gazes of a few employees, and my gut told me the rumors had begun to spread. Every greeting sounded stiff, as if they were trying to maintain distance from someone on the brink of being let go. I quietly entered my office, opened my email, and saw nothing from Dominic, but a new internal file had appeared, titled, Temporary Personnel Direction Announcement. I didn't open it. I simply leaned back in my chair, gazing at the sea through the large glass pane, a feeling rising in my chest. Painful yet clear. A soft knock broke the stillness. It was Rachel Lynn, the youngest designer in the company, the one I had hired despite her lack of experience. Rachel stepped in, arms full of sketches, her expression worried. Ms. Amanda, can I talk to you in private? She asked softly, voice trembling. I nodded. She set the folder down, inhaled deeply. I think you should know this. The past few days, Jessica's been coming down to the design floor, saying you're having a psychological breakdown. She's telling people you'll be stepping back soon to focus on treatment. They're saying you're losing control and Dominic will be temporarily in charge. I sat still, every word landing like a blade. Psychological breakdown? I repeated, my voice dry. Rachel nodded, her sincere eyes filled with concern. And yesterday, I overheard her telling the tech team that you threw things in your office. She even emailed longtime clients saying you're overwhelmed and need rest, so Dominic will be taking over the Horizon project. I think they're building a narrative to destroy your credibility. My hands clenched, knuckles turning white. Now I understood why people had avoided my gaze this morning, why every greeting was so strained. Dominic and Jessica weren't just after the company. They wanted to destroy my reputation, to make everyone believe I was a weak, unstable woman who had lost control. Everything I'd built over the last 10 years, respect, credibility, client trust, was being slowly twisted into something unrecognizable by the two people I trusted most. Rachel looked at me, nervous. I know telling you this might get me in trouble, but I don't want them to hurt you. I owe you a lot. If you need proof, I can record what they say in the internal chats. I looked at the young woman in front of me and saw in her eyes a reflection of myself 10 years ago. Idealistic, hopeful, and still believing that justice had a place in a cutthroat industry. I gently touched her hand and said quietly, Thank you, Rachel. You're braver than most people here. After she left, I sat still, took a deep breath, and opened my notebook, writing a single line, They're crafting a story. I'll write the truth. I closed the notebook, looked out at the morning light spilling over the sea, and for the first time, I didn't tremble. I was no longer a victim. I was the one redesigning the strategy for my own life. That evening, I called Maya Collins and told her everything Rachel had just revealed. Maya was silent for a few seconds, then responded with a tone so calm it chilled me, the voice of someone who had faced far more cunning adversaries. Amanda, stay silent. Don't confront. Don't react. Let them grow confident and make mistakes. The one who thinks they're the smartest always exposes themselves first. Her words grounded me, made me feel both afraid and oddly tethered. Silence. The hardest thing for me, someone who had always responded with reason and action. But Maya was right. This time, I couldn't fight with anger. I had to fight with strategy. The next day, I sent an internal email to the company stating that I was taking a week off to rest due to work-related fatigue. It was how I created space for Dominic and Jessica to act freely, and I knew they wouldn't waste the opportunity. While I stayed quiet, they would believe I was weak, and in that moment, they'd reveal everything. I didn't return to the office that entire week. I spent my days at the beachside villa, pretending to be exhausted, just as they had described me. I turned off notifications, checking internal communications only through a secondary account Maya had helped me set up. 3 days later, just as I expected, Dominic and Jessica made their move. They released a press statement. The headline was simple, yet bitter. Sanchez Design Studio enters rebranding phase under the leadership of Dominic Hayes and Jessica Moore. The opening lines of the article described me as a talented founder temporarily stepping back for personal growth, while Dominic was hailed as a new creative leader bringing a fresh modern vision. Jessica was listed as the media contact. Together, they were rewriting the company's history by erasing my name, without me having to die first. I stayed silent, just as Maya had advised, but in that silence, I was not idle. I tracked every move they made, every media release, every hashtag Jessica strategically seeded on social media. Hashtag New Vision, hashtag Hayes Era, hashtag Design Reimagined. I saved everything, like collecting each faulty brick in a broken building to later reconstruct a wall of truth. On Thursday afternoon, I received a message from Rachel Lynn. "You need to see this." Attached was a covert recording of an internal meeting I wasn't invited to. In the video, Dominic stood before a group of employees and declared confidently, "From today, I'll be leading the company in a new direction. Amanda needs time to rest, and we should respect that. Jessica will be co-leading all major projects with me." The room responded with awkward claps. Jessica beamed, tilting her head toward him like a triumphant PR queen. Watching the video, I no longer felt anger, just a strange, spreading calm. They had confessed everything, on camera, in front of the entire staff. I rewound the clip where Dominic said, "I'll be leading the company in a new direction," and paused on his smug smile, so confident, so unaware that this exact moment would become the strongest piece of evidence against him. I sent the copy to Maya with a single message. They just signed their own sentence. She replied almost instantly, "Good. Now you wait." Sometimes silence is the most perfectly designed blueprint for collapse. Sometimes silence is the most perfectly designed blueprint for collapse. Maya's words echoed in my mind as I sat in front of my laptop, the screen's blue light reflecting off my face. Exhausted, but strangely lucid. I didn't sleep. I needed to see just how far they were willing to take this power game. While checking the Google alert I had set up years ago to track my company's name, a new result appeared just hours ago. Hayes Studio, elevating modern coastal design. My heartbeat slowed. I clicked the link. The web page opened in a pristine white interface, sleek and bold, with a brazen tagline at the top. "Where vision meets the shore." In the About Us section, I read a paragraph Jessica had clearly written. Under the leadership of Dominic Hayes and the strategic media vision of Jessica Moore, Hayes Studio is redefining modern coastal architecture. I scrolled down and reached the Projects section, renderings from the Coastal Haven project, my own designs. But the signature in the bottom right corner had been erased, replaced with a new logo, a blue wave, captioned, "Concept by Hayes Studio." My chest tightened like I'd been punched. Every night, I stayed up refining color tones, perfecting how the light moved across glass panels, now repurposed as marketing for a counterfeit brand. I opened the team page and saw Jessica Moore listed as PR Director, right beneath Dominic in the leadership column, their photo together staged in a studio with a blueprint in the background I recognized instantly. They had turned my life's work into a launchpad for their empire. I didn't cry. The grief had hardened into something cold and solid, something that only knew how to act. I pressed Ctrl+S, saving the entire website as a PDF, then took screenshots of every section. About, projects, leadership. I created a new folder on my laptop, Hayes_fraud_archive. Then I pulled up the company credit card statements. The latest entries showed a series of payments to media agencies in San Francisco, including one charge of $18,400 labeled Website Development and Branding Services, Hayes Studio. I almost laughed. They weren't just reckless. They were stupid enough to use a company credit card under my name to fund their stolen venture. I sent everything to Maya via email with a short message. They're writing their own indictment. Minutes later, she called. Her voice was steady, as if she'd been expecting this. Perfect. What you just sent is the final puzzle piece. He hasn't just stolen intellectual property. He's funded a competing brand with company assets. We can file for intellectual property theft and commercial identity fraud. I could hear her fountain pen scratching paper, deliberate and sharp, every stroke slicing through the illusion Dominic had built. She continued. Amanda, don't be angry anymore. You're now at the stage every traitor fears most, the moment the truth becomes legally documented. I nodded, even though she couldn't see. I looked toward the Coastal Haven model on my desk, brushed dust from the transparent cover. Outside, the ocean at night was black and vast, the waves repeating in steady rhythm, a silent promise that everything stolen would soon be reclaimed by my own hand. I didn't have to wait long for the right moment. 2 weeks after Maya filed the legal documents, Dominic announced a brand launch party at our beachside villa. He sent out invitations under the guise of a 10-year anniversary of Sanchez Design Studio, but the subheading, A New Era of Vision, revealed his true intent. It was the official unveiling of Hayes Studio, disguised as a celebration. Maya told me I should attend, but not as a wife. Go as the one holding the evidence, she said. I agreed. I wouldn't stand on the sidelines anymore. That evening, the Monterey coast was bathed in golden sunset, the breeze thick with salt and laughter from guests who had no idea what they were about to witness. I stepped out of the car in a simple black fitted dress, hair tied low, no elaborate makeup. No one noticed me enter. They were too busy admiring Jessica Moore, standing beside Dominic on the lawn in a white V-neck dress, the exact silhouette I had designed for my personal collection 2 years prior. The golden lights bathed her skin, making her look like a distorted replica of me, false but dazzling. Dominic held Jessica's hand, smiling with confidence, greeting guests with the demeanor of someone about to claim victory. I spotted local reporters, a few investors, and many long-standing clients who had originally signed contracts based on my name. They all believed this event was to celebrate Sanchez Design Studio's journey and that Dominic was still its rightful face. I stood at the edge near the glass doors as Dominic began his speech, his voice theatrical, confident, the same tone I had once coached him on during early conferences. Thank you all for being here tonight. We, Dominic Hayes and Jessica Moore, are proud to open a new chapter in California interior design, where vision meets creativity to carry us into the future. Scattered applause followed. Dominic held his head high, glancing at Jessica with a conspiratorial gleam. She smiled, placing her hand lightly on his chest, perfectly poised for the camera to capture the moment of joint leadership. I stood at the exit near the glass, my hand gripping the USB drive inside my clutch, the one containing all the videos, emails, and legal records Maya had prepared. I stepped forward, the sound of my heels striking the wooden deck cut through the murmurs. A new chapter indeed, I said, voice calm and cold, slicing through the golden-lit air. The entire crowd turned. Dominic froze, his smile faltering mid-sentence, Jessica paling, her hand retreating from his shoulder. I took another step forward, eyes locked on Dominic. But you're not in it. The atmosphere turned to ice. I pulled a small remote from my purse and pressed the button. The LED screen behind the stage flickered, shifting from the Hayes Studio logo to a video clip. Dominic's voice rang out through the speakers. "My marriage is a joke. Amanda's not in my league. She just draws and thinks she's a genius." Jessica's voice followed. "You're the one who made this company famous. Without you, she's nothing." The crowd erupted in shock. Mouths gaped, people exchanged glances, camera flashes exploded. I stared at Dominic, my voice even. "Thank you for hosting this party. You just saved me the trouble of announcing the evidence." Maya stepped out behind me, holding a sealed envelope, speaking with authority. "By order of the Monterey Court, all brand rights and legal representation revert to Ms. Amanda Sanchez. All acts of fraud and misappropriation of company assets will be addressed in court next week." Dominic moved forward, voice tight. "You're ruining my reputation." I looked at him, voice cold as glass. "No, Dominic. You did that yourself. With your own words, the ocean wind rose, tearing one corner of the backdrop. The words, Hayes Studio, fluttered, barely holding on, as if it, too, was collapsing. I stepped back, looking around the villa that once was our home, now filled with whispers from those who had just seen the truth unmasked. And in that moment, I knew. The joke he built had ended, and the ending was no longer in his hands. The next morning, just as I stepped out of the bedroom in my beachside villa, my phone started buzzing nonstop. News had spread across industry sites and social media. On architectural forums, headlines were everywhere. Amanda Sanchez betrayed by husband and PR lead, corporate takeover plot exposed. A post from Design Chronicle opened with, "Last night, California's design community was shaken by a leaked video capturing the conversation between Dominic Hayes and Jessica Moore, revealing a plot to seize the brand from founder Amanda Sanchez." I stared at the words, feeling something strange. Not bitterness, but a quiet calm, tinged with a deep, aching sadness. The phone kept ringing. Journalists asked for interviews. Colleagues and strangers sent messages of support. Amid the chaos, a new alert popped up. Horizon Hospitality releases official statement. I opened it. The declaration read, "We reaffirm our full trust in Amanda Sanchez and her original design team. The collaboration agreement between Horizon and Sanchez Design Studio remains valid. Any other individual claiming to represent the company is not recognized." I set my phone down, eyes stinging. Just a week ago, Dominic had tried to use that very contract to convince investors to back Hayes Studio. Now it had become public proof of his failure. I looked out the window, where sunlight danced on the ocean. My chest felt lighter, not from victory, but from the quiet knowledge that justice was beginning to move, even without me having to shout. That afternoon, Maya called. Her voice was steady. "Good news. The board and corporate oversight committee have temporarily suspended Dominic Hayes' legal representative status pending investigation. All brand, asset, and contractual rights have been restored under your name." I stayed silent for a moment, listening to the waves through the phone, then asked softly, "And Jessica?" Maya let out a quiet, emotionless laugh. "A major PR firm in San Francisco just terminated her contract. She's now listed as a high-risk entity in the industry." I leaned back on the sofa, scanning the empty living room. Once a symbol of the marriage I thought was solid. The walnut dining table, the ocean painting on the wall, the crystal glasses we picked out during our first work trip together. Now, they were relics of a carefully constructed lie. More messages came through, some from colleagues, others from strangers thanking me for speaking out about what many women in the industry endure. I read every word, and my heart clenched, not out of self-pity, but because I realized my story was no longer just my own. That night, I sat by the window, listening to the ocean winds beating through the curtains. Outside, the waves crashed in steady rhythm, while inside, my storm had passed. Dominic may lose everything, his name, his position, his power. But what he would never get back was the trust he shattered with his own words. I took a sip of tea, watching distant lights reflect across the sea, and said quietly to no one but the night, "Sometimes justice doesn't need the voice of a courtroom. It only needs the silence of those once dismissed, and the light of truth will find its way." But this time, that light would shine inside a real courtroom. 1 week after the scandal, Maya and I walked into the Monterey County Courthouse for an emergency hearing to determine legal ownership and representation of the company. The hallway was long, the stone floors cold, and the smell of aged wood in the air made every footstep echo like a heartbeat. Dominic stood at the other end, clad in an expensive gray suit, still wearing that smug expression, as if this was all just a minor misunderstanding that could be smoothed over with eloquence. Beside him was Jessica Moore, her face pale, hair tied back. Nothing like the confident woman from days before. When the judge called the case, Dominic stepped up to the stand, his voice proud. "Your Honor, I was legally authorized by Amanda Sanchez 2 months ago. This company exists because of my efforts and the media team I built. Her accusations of brand theft are inaccurate and personal." He spoke slowly, clearly, glancing at me occasionally to see if I'd flinch. I didn't. I simply looked back, silent. In that moment, I saw what had once made me love him. His confidence, his charm. But now those same traits had become weapons of betrayal. Maya rose, her eyes sharp, voice firm. "Your Honor, the defendant is correct on one point. Ms. Amanda Sanchez did sign a temporary authorization. But we present evidence that this was abused to alter brand ownership, misuse company funds, and divert the Coastal Haven project to a separate entity named Hayes Studio, led by Mr. Dominic Hayes and Ms. Jessica Moore." She placed a thick file on the bench and clicked her laptop. A large screen displayed a series of emails with subject lines and timestamps. Here is Mr. Hayes' email to an investor in Los Angeles stating, "We, the Hayes Creative Group team, are responsible for the Coastal Haven project." This is not administrative error. It is premeditated intellectual property theft. Dominic tried to interject, his voice tense. "That was just a marketing campaign, not theft." Maya didn't let him finish. She switched to the next slide, her voice even but weighty. "Then let the court listen to this recording." The room fell still as Dominic's voice played. "My marriage is a joke. Amanda's not in my league. She just draws and thinks she's a genius." Then Jessica, "You're the one who made the company famous." "Without you, she's nothing," murmurs swept the room. Dominic's face drained of color. His hand gripped the edge of the podium. Jessica kept her head down, unable to look up. The judge tapped his gavel softly, commanding, "Silence in the courtroom." Then he looked toward me, then Maya, and declared, "All evidence is accepted and valid." The court confirms Amanda Sanchez as the sole legal owner of Sanchez Design Studio. Mr. Dominic Hayes is charged with reputation fraud and misappropriation of corporate assets. Ms. Jessica Moore is considered an accomplice and will be further investigated. I exhaled slowly, as if hundreds of pounds had just been lifted off me. Dominic bowed his head, lips tight, his eyes stripped of confidence, now hollow. Jessica sat frozen, tears rolling down her cheek. But I felt no pity anymore. Inside, I was calm, like the sea after a storm. As the judge closed the hearing, Maya leaned in and whispered, "It's done, Amanda." The rest is just procedure. I looked one last time at Dominic, saw him looking back, eyes a mix of desperation and resentment. I nodded, a silent farewell, not to him, but to the version of myself that once believed love could fix everything. The trial ended. I walked out into the corridor, the morning chill wrapping around me, and as the courtroom doors closed behind me, I knew, this time justice had truly spoken. 3 days later, the official ruling was announced. I sat in Maya's office on the 14th floor, sunlight spilling through the window, casting a golden glow over the thick file stamped in red. Maya's voice was crisp. The court's final decision is in. Dominic Hayes is ordered to repay $1.4 million to the company, covering all misused funds from the media budget, including costs for the Hayes Studio website and fraudulent PR contracts. Jessica Moore is banned from practicing public relations for 3 years and placed on the industry watch list. I listened, my chest light as if the wind had finally cleared the stone that had blocked my breath for months. Maya set the papers down and gave a soft smile. It's over, Amanda. But I knew, for Dominic, it was only the beginning of the collapse. That afternoon, I returned to the villa to collect the last of my things. The temporary Hayes Studio sign once mounted on the wall had been removed, leaving a faded paint patch, the scar of a fleeting ambition. As I stepped onto the lawn, I saw Dominic standing by the railing, facing the sea. He was no longer the sharply dressed man I once knew, just a wrinkled shirt, eyes tired and vacant. I intended to walk past, but he spoke first, voice rough and heavy. You wouldn't have existed without me. I stopped. The ocean wind blew hard, carrying salt and sounds from crashing waves. I turned and looked at him. The man who had once been everything, now only a silhouette among the ruins of his own making. I answered slowly, every word deliberate, not angry. Just the truth, settled into its rightful place. I existed before you, and now I'll live well after you. Dominic gave a dry laugh, but it wasn't the confident smirk I once knew. It was the laugh of someone who realized he lost long ago, still pretending it didn't hurt. He turned away, staring out to sea, saying nothing more. I walked on, crossing the threshold, leaving behind the wind and a man trying to start over from ash. On the way home, I got a message from Rachel. Everyone at the studio is celebrating. Horizon Project is back on track. We're all here, waiting for you to return. I smiled, for the first time in months, feeling my lips curve naturally. Ahead of me, the coastal road stretched out in golden sunlight, wind sweeping through palm trees. And in that moment, I understood. It wasn't justice that saved me, but the belief that I deserved freedom, deserved to start over, no longer defined by my place beside any man. 2 days later, I returned to Monterey Courthouse to finalize asset transfers and receive legal confirmation of ownership over Sanchez Design Studio. As I descended the cold stone steps, the afternoon sun cast long shadows through rows of palm trees, the light spreading like a soft golden carpet beneath my feet. In the distance, the water sparkled under the sky, and I could hear the rhythm of waves blending with the wind, a symphony welcoming a new kind of freedom. At the end of the corridor, a few reporters waited. They rushed forward as soon as they saw me, microphones raised, cameras flashing. One voice called out, "Ms. Amanda, after everything that's happened, do you have any regrets?" I paused. Regret. That word had choked my throat for months, had haunted my sleepless nights with questions I couldn't stop asking myself. But today, standing in the light and wind, I felt peace, like the ocean itself had opened before me. I smiled, not avoiding the lens, and said softly but clearly, "I only regret believing they could redesign my life." The words echoed, clean, final, and I heard the cameras pause for a brief, silent beat. A few reporters bowed their heads, not to take notes, but perhaps to feel something truer. I walked past them, my hair brushing in the breeze, my heart strangely still. Ahead lay the road to the ocean, once a symbol of grief, now a beginning. As I opened the car door, I glanced back at the courthouse behind me, a place that had once embodied fear, now nothing more than a neat period at the end of a blueprint I no longer followed. I whispered, "Freedom isn't walking away, it's knowing you've returned," with a map drawn by your own hands. Then I drove off, toward the horizon, where the last light of day melted into the sea, where a new life waited to be designed, this time by me. 1 month after the final legal procedures concluded, I returned to my old office, now quiet, spotless, and bathed in natural light. I looked at the sign reading Sanchez Design Studio above the door and realized I no longer wanted to keep it. That name had followed me for 10 years, but it was also tied to cracks, to lies, to days when I had to exhaust myself proving my worth in a marriage built on control. I wanted to start again, not just in name, but with the soul of a new brand. So, I renamed the company Sanchez Atelier. Atelier, a creative workshop, a place where everything is crafted by hand, with care, intention, and honesty. I wanted that word to remind me that creativity doesn't need a grand stage. It just needs a place where ideas are nurtured through trust. Under this new name, I no longer chased luxury projects for the elite. Instead, I invested our entire budget and team into restoring neglected coastal spaces, abandoned warehouses, dilapidated villas, forgotten buildings along the Monterey shore. With every structure I restored, I felt as though I was piecing myself back together. Each brick, each rough wall, a reminder that even what once seemed broken can be rebuilt, if held by steady hands. I spent more time at the beachside villa, not to dwell on pain, but to transform it into a creative studio, open to architecture students. I took down the heavy curtains and replaced them with clear glass so sunlight could flood in. The living room where Dominic once hosted his betrayal was now converted into a workshop space. Large drafting tables now sat where wine glasses and forced laughter once lingered. In their place, only the sound of pencils gliding on paper and distant waves. Each month, I hosted a small class for final-year students from the University of California. Together, we sketched, discussed the philosophy of space, the value of sustainable design, and sometimes I told them my story. Not as a tragedy, but as an example that even when you're torn apart, you can rebuild and make it better than before. That evening, as I walked the hallway, watching students work, I paused at the large window facing the ocean. Golden sunlight bathed unfinished sketches, and the wind gently swept through my hair. In that moment, I felt a peace I had never known, not driven by the need to prove myself, nor overshadowed by comparison. Only me, a woman once betrayed, once humiliated, now standing in a space she herself had revived. I touched the wooden frame of the window, smiled softly, and whispered to myself, "Rebuilding isn't about forgetting. It's about proving that even foundations once collapsed can still be strong enough to hold a new beginning." And strangely enough, just a few months later, I began to see that same rebirth, not only in myself, but in those around me. Rachel Lynn, the once timid young woman who had walked into my office with fear in her eyes and unwavering loyalty, had now become the youngest design team lead at Sanchez Atelier. I still remember the day I handed her the official contract. She burst into tears like a child, saying she never imagined being trusted that deeply. I placed a hand on her shoulder and smiled. "You deserve it. You were brave enough to speak the truth when everyone else stayed silent. That's what real leadership is made of, Ing." Each morning as I pass the drafting room, I see Rachel standing by the sketchboard, passionately explaining concepts to our interns. She echoes the principles I once taught her. Design isn't for show, it's for healing. I watch quietly, seeing a part of myself in her. Not the old Amanda who tried to please everyone, but the Amanda who had learned to step back and let others shine. One late afternoon, after class ended, Rachel brought me a cup of peppermint tea and said softly, "I still remember when they called you unstable. Now everyone sees how strong you truly are." I looked at her, smiled gently. Being strong doesn't mean you don't hurt. It just means you've learned not to let pain define you. Then I turned to the window. The sunset dyed the sea in shades of deep red, waves rising and falling slowly, as if nature itself was breathing with me. I spoke softly, almost as a reminder to myself. Justice isn't just about winning a case. It's about learning not to let others define your worth. And in that moment, I understood that my greatest victory wasn't in court rulings or million-dollar contracts. It was in standing here, in my own space, able to look back without hatred. I had learned to let the past become foundation, not chains, and by offering space to the next generation, people like Rachel, I knew I was doing something Dominic never could. When a woman heals, she doesn't just save herself, she builds a path for others to follow. That very thought drove me to begin something new, something I wished I had when everything collapsed. 3 months later, I launched a program called Reclaim Space, a mentorship and training initiative for women in creative industries, architecture, design, art, and media. Its goal was clear: to help them protect their intellectual rights, their reputations, and their personal value in spaces so often ruled by power and manipulation. I wanted the women once seen as supporting roles to take their place on the very stage they helped build. The launch event was held in the same beachside villa, once the scene of betrayal, now redecorated in white and filled with natural light. The walls that once echoed with hollow laughter now displayed photographs of women working, drawing, measuring, discussing ideas. In the center of the room stood a large wooden plaque engraved with the words, "Reclaim Space. Every woman deserves her own room to create." I stood before an audience, mostly women in the field, some who had lived through what I had, and felt my throat tighten with emotion. I took the mic, drew a deep breath, and smiled. I used to think fairness only came from verdicts or laws. But truly, it begins the moment we stand up and say, "This is my space." They once said I wasn't good enough, calm enough, worthy enough to lead. They took my work, put their names on it, and laughed atop the success I built. But in the end, it was that very act that taught me this: no one can redesign your life unless you let them. The room fell silent. A woman in the front row nodded, tears falling quietly. In the far corner, a young student mouthed the words as she wrote them down. I continued. I don't share my story to complain. I share it to remind you, even when they take everything, you still have the most precious things: your mind, your hands, and your resolve. You might lose your name on a company wall, but you never lose your right to shape your life. Applause followed, hesitant at first, then swelling, then rolling like waves. In that moment, I realized Reclaim Space wasn't just a project. It was a movement, a message that women like me don't need pity. They just need to be seen and believed. After the event, many stayed to talk. Rachel introduced me to a group of students seeking internships. One woman who'd had her ideas stolen by a former boss shook my hand and said she was ready to begin again. I smiled, heart light as the sea breeze. Outside, the sunset faded gently, casting amber light over our display models. I looked around the room, each brick, each wall, telling the same story. When you reclaim your space, you don't just save yourself, you create a place where others can find themselves too. That late afternoon, the coastal skyline was aglow with the soft golden-orange hues of sunset. I stood in front of the villa's wide glass doors, now Sanchez Atelier, no longer a house of memory, but a symbol of freedom. The sea wind swept through my hair, carrying the salt-heavy air, light yet steady like the ocean's breath. In my hand was a glass of red wine, the same wine I had once prepared for a wedding anniversary, once the beginning of betrayal, now marking its quiet end. I gently swirled the glass, letting the sunset reflect across its surface, and my gaze landed on a new architectural model at the center of the room. Samandana Horizon, Sanchez Atelier's first project after the rebirth. It was a design for a coastal community center, a space where women could work, create, and heal. The evening light filtered through the model's miniature glass panes, casting shimmering reflections on the walls, like cracks lined with gold, proof that broken things can become even more beautiful when rebuilt with courage. I took a slow sip, letting the tannins bloom across my tongue, and smiled. There was no bitterness, no lingering hatred, only the peace of someone who had walked through ruin and returned to herself. Outside, the waves crashed steadily against the shore, the sound a reminder from the sea. That true strength isn't about never falling, but rising with hands that once trembled. My voice echoed gently through the quiet room, a final monologue, calm and clear. They made me a joke. I made that shame my foundation. The last light of day faded, casting streaks of orange and red over the water. I set the wineglass down beside the Samandana Horizon model, then stepped out onto the balcony, where the wind lifted the hem of my dress. The sound of waves merged with soft background music, closing the story of a woman once silenced, now standing fully in the space she built, speaking again with the full force of freedom